Okay, let's begin. So we're on Daf Mem Beis Amud Aleph 42a, and we've been learning about Brochos in the middle of a meal, and this would touch upon the question of desserts. It also touches upon when some people, I haven't seen it lately, but years ago, I used to see you'd go to a Shabbos table and they would have a piece of melon, a slice of melon on every person's seat. And that would be like the beginning part of the meal that they would give everyone, like cantaloupe. And I don't know if anyone does it anymore, but years ago, you used to come to, like, the table was set with the napkin and the plates and the forks, and then you had on the plate, you had like a piece of a nice slice, chopped, maybe, no, probably not cut, but a nice slice of cantaloupe. And
yeah, they do it to refresh the palate for the meal.
Yeah, right. Right. So the question is, would you recite a bracha on that? It's you're washing first. You make kiddush, you wash, and then you would have, then that would be, and that's not something that's really part of the meal. It's generally it's like an extra, not really part of it. It's not for sustenance. On the other hand, maybe it's more like as Avraham is saying, it's really to sort of, it's sort of like in order to eat the meal. It's like a necessity for the meal, to develop your to get you ready for the meal, like, and so that would be a reason why maybe it should be included in the hamaitzi, and maybe you don't need a bracha. So I'm leaning towards not making a bracha on that type of even though if it was served for dessert, I would think you would need a bracha for melon served as dessert, because dessert is not really essentially part of the meal. It's really something that comes after the meal as an addition. But this is really this is in order for the meal. It's like to whet your appetite a little, to somehow get you in the mode of eating. And it would seem that maybe it's considered in order, it's a necessity for the meal. So that would be a reason why at this point, if you ate it, it would not need a bracha maybe. And at the end of the meal, it would seem that it would need a bracha. The truth is, I should look it up, but so we'll have to, if anyone looks into that, that's seems like it could depend on when you're eating the melon. But that's one issue. Another issue that comes up would be on Rosh Hashanah, when we have all of these minhagim, the different customs of different foods that one eats in order for a siman toiv, for a good sign. And some people have tzimis, they have some type of carrot mixture, and other people everyone has apples and honey, but other people have, people have different custom, different traditional simonim, different traditional symbolic foods that one has to be a sign to have a good year. What would the law be with regard to reciting a bracha? Now, the apple is the ha'etz bracha, and we know you say a bracha ha'etz on the apple. So we see it's not really part of the meal, and you do need to recite a bracha. However, what about something like cabbage? Some people are going to eat cabbage, not because the cabbage is part of the Yontiv Rosh Hashanah meal, but they're eating it in the beginning of the meal with the Yehi Ratzon as a prayer of a symbolic good year. So why do they, what would the law be with regard to brachas? Would you need to recite a ho'adama on such a In other words, if it's part of the meal, you're eating it with the chicken. You have chicken, you have cabbage, you have coleslaw. No problem. It's included. It's part of the meal. But here you're having the cabbage as a symbolic food in the beginning of the meal, not really part of the meal. So I am told that one of the big poskim in Eretz Yisrael says the person who's going to have these type of food should recite a ho'adama on something else. Should recite a bracha ho'adama on a banana or something, and this way exempt these foods, because it would seem like they maybe should have a bracha. The only problem is I don't know if a banana would be a good option, because since you recite a ha'etz on the apple, and the banana is a safek ha'etz, there is such a thought that a banana should be ha'etz. So therefore, maybe a banana would be a problem to recite a bracha on. So maybe you'd have to pick a different vegetable that definitely is not part of the meal, and have in mind, to fulfill, to be mitzi your cabbage and other traditional foods that one is eating special in the beginning of the meal and not part of the meal. It's only for the simanim.
Rabbi.
Yes.
Yeah, your first example was similar to what I was asking about, I think about a week ago, with making bracha on an olive at the beginning of a meal. So I was thinking, like, if you went to a Purim Suda and everybody watched and everybody went into the dining room and all that was on the table was bread and olives, let's say, or bread and olives and figs or dates, would you not make a bracha on those olives or figs or dates? And there's no other food that's brought out, just that.
Right. So the truth is, I'm not really sure. Those type of foods do fit in the meal. Maybe like pickles, olives. I don't know about the dates and the figs. That's getting into our Gemara here with the figs and the grapes. Now you're touching on the Gemara with the figs and the grapes. But let's just pick the olive case. The olives maybe do belong in a meal. Olives, pickles, these are the coleslaw. Sometimes people do have that. It's not in other words, it's eaten as part of the meal. It's not like eating something as a symbolic food that really doesn't belong in the meal. This is part of the meal. So therefore, it would seemingly maybe be included in the hamaitzi. That's
Did they bring those foods, dates and figs, because they're from Eretz Yisrael, or because that's the only fruit that they had around?
Right. So now you're jumping back to our Gemara. You're saying that the figs and the grapes. Why does our Gemara ask this question?
No, I'm asking in reference to my question that special significance was given to the olives, to the Eretz Yisrael fruits, and therefore, if I had an olive at the beginning of a meal or in the middle of a meal, I would break a bracha because it was an Eretz Yisrael food. And the Gemara is giving examples with only Eretz Yisrael foods like figs and dates. So I thought there was a special chashivas, a special importance and significance that a person would make a bracha on such a thing, even after they watched.
So you're sort of saying that maybe the Gemara is giving this example because it was common for people to bring that during in the meal because people wanted to show chashivas to the 7 species. I don't know if that's if you could say that, because if it was common for people to do that and bring these 7 species in the meal, then maybe it would become like automatically part of the meal because everyone does it. Maybe if it was done all the time. I don't know. You know what I mean? From the Gemara, it sounds like it just happened to be they brought these grapes and these figs It sounded like it's a one-time thing that they brought it. They happened to bring it. It doesn't even say, when you go to a meal and they have this, it's like if they brought before them, you know what I mean? Like it sounds like it's after the fact. They had brought before you this. I just understand it to be in the olden days, they didn't have what we have nowadays, where you go and buy whatever you want. In those days, you sort of ate whatever was available. And they didn't get from Peru plums in the summer, and avocados from New Zealand in the winter. You know what I mean? Like they didn't have all these. We got whatever we want. So you know what I mean? We can have dates and grapes. There, it's like you're lucky if you got something, a grape to eat for the whole day, or something. So they brought it. That's what they brought during the meal. It's not like now you have the stores where you buy, you can have whatever you want. That's my understanding. Is there an inyan to have fruit that Israel is blessed with? I'm not sure. I mean, it's I don't know. I don't know if you really have to go out of your way to buy fruit that Israel is blessed with. And so I'm not sure if you would recite a bracha on it. If you're only eating it because of Israel's blessed with it, maybe you're right. Maybe then you would need a bracha because that's the only reason you're eating it. But if it's like a pickle during a meal, it's sort of what they have during the meal. That's what people nosh on. It's like it's part of the snacking. They're in between courses, until they give you stuff to snack on until the waitress brings the next course. Yeah, so you snack on these olives or pickles. I think it would be included. But look it up. So feel free to share anything you find. We'd love to. I'd like to find that I'm wrong. Yes, Susan.
One of the customs in these so-called delicatessens on the tables, they always had pickles, olives, sauerkraut, and you could have whatever. It's almost like not to cleanse the palate necessarily, but to increase your appetite.
Mm-hmm.
Sour, salty, nothing
Right.
sweet that was on the table. To me, maybe it had something to do with Jewish or not. I don't know. I'm not saying it.
Jews do like pickles. I will tell you that. And that's why all the pickles say kosher pickles on them. I don't know why they sell all the pickles, all the goyish pickles. They say these kosher pickles. I don't know. Somehow it's a Jewish thing. But very interesting.
What I'm saying is that it was almost like expected. You always had 3 different with little plates and little silverware to increase your appetite, to obviously to eat more food, obviously. But I really think maybe this ties into what the Gemara is teaching, that there's certain foods that that are special to us.
Mm-hmm.
I know when I cook, I mean, when I cook for somebody, it's not goyish cooking. It's, I don't know how to explain it. I put myself into my cooking. Let me just put it that way.
Okay. So the other case that we mentioned earlier, thank you, Susan. The other case that we mentioned also was about the bracha on maror, eating, like, is maror really part of the meal? And do you recite a bracha on maror? We don't recite a ho'adama on maror, but we do recite a ho'adama on the karpas. Karpas is the either potato or onion or a mixture of potato and onion. They dip it in salt water, right? The karpas, or celery, some people use, or parsley, whatever is used, carrots, whatever you use for the karpas, certain vegetable. At the beginning of you recite a bari pri hadama. Now that makes sense. You have to recite a hadama then because you didn't make hamaitzi yet, so you didn't have bread. So for sure you have to eat that. You have to recite a hadama on that vegetable. But the thing is that we actually have in mind. For the maror that we're going to eat later. And the reason why we have that in mind for the maror is because maybe the maror is not included in the, it's not included in the meal because it's not really part of the meal. Who eats plain maror, plain horseradish? We're eating it. We're eating it as
a reminder
an obligation.
A reminder.
But it's not really part of a meal. So
Right.
therefore, it really should need a bracha.
Rabbi Smith,
Yes.
that puts me in mind that it's like a condiment, at like salt or pepper or mustard, and maybe these don't need barachot because they're really flavorings. They're not actually foods per se. I mean, I always thought more was because it's a specific thing that you're that it's a mitzvah to eat on Pesach because of its symbolism, but maybe it's in the classification of a condiment.
So it's a condiment if you eat gefilte fish with it. But if you're eating it plain, not much of a condiment.
Oh, yes.
So it would seemingly need a bracha. Now, of course, this is a discussion in the commentaries. Either you don't recite a bracha at all, or you have in mind with the bracha that you're reciting, and the karpas. Possibly you don't need a bracha because it's bitter. You only recite a bracha on something you enjoy, you get pleasure from, something that's bitter. It's not really something that you're benefiting from. So therefore there would be no bracha. So there is discussion in the commentaries about reciting a bracha on maror, not in our Gemara really, more in the Gemara in Psachim. But this does tie into these laws. Now we mentioned two things yesterday. One thing we said was, why doesn't the bread exempt the wine? And we said because the wine is goyrem bracha liatzmai, wine, even though you're having wine during the meal, but the bread doesn't exempt it because wine is unique, wine is special. It's called goyrem bracha liatzmai. It causes a bracha for itself, even if a person isn't planning on drinking the wine for pleasure, he still needs a bracha because wine has such a special uniqueness to quality to it. Therefore, the challah, the bracha and the hamaitzi does not cover it. Now, then we said the story of Rav Huna eating these 13 loaves of pas haba v'kisnin, of cake bread. And it says that each of these, they were large. Each of them was a third of a kav. And anyway, he didn't recite a bracha afterwards. Either he didn't recite any bracha, he didn't recite brachas hamazon, and he didn't recite even alamichya. It's unclear what bracha he did recite, but he definitely did not say the berachas hamazon, the grace after meal, even though he ate such a large amount. And Rav Nachman told him, he said, Rav Huna, how could you do such a thing? You ate these for hunger. You were hungry. You ate them. So he says, whatever you eat that others, the amount that others would be kaivei asuuda, would make a meal on, that you need to recite a berachas hamazon on, even if you're not satisfied. You ate so much and you're still not satisfied. It doesn't matter. If others would be satisfied, would eat this as an established meal, then your opinion is nullified to theirs and you need to recite a grace after meal. I remember many years ago in Rhode Island, I used to go to a shul. So they used to have discussions there every morning on their coffee, and they would drink. The custom was they would have tam-tams, coffee, and old granddad. And the old granddad they would pour into the coffee. Everyone would have a little chayim in their coffee, and that's how they would go to work. They would have tam-tams anyway. So one of the guys used to always have a question. He would ask, what do you think if we ate a whole package of tam-tams, would you need to say a berachas hamazon, a grace after meal? That was his big question. He used to ask it all the time. What do you think? Should if you ate the whole package of tam-tams, that's a meal. So would you need to recite a grace after meal?
And if you're satiated, the answer is yes. If you're not satiated, it's a man shalosh. That's it.
So Ezra says very simple. If you're satiated, because it would seem that he's right. Tam-tams are probably majority oil, and or if it's not, at least it has it's considered like a cracker that would be that would could be considered pasa babakisnis type of cake bread, and eaten as a snack. It cracks it. Based on the different opinions of what makes something cake versus bread. So it would seem to be mezainis. However, if you eat, as we mentioned yesterday, if you eat 4 eggs worth, that would be, and satisfied, if you eat 4 eggs worth and you're satisfied, you would need to recite a grace after meal. However, if you didn't eat, if you weren't satisfied, so then it goes by what the majority of people, what people would eat to be kaveh suuda, to establish a meal on. So we mentioned yesterday that the amount that for sure you could say the grace after meal, for sure you could say grace after meal, would be if you ate 21.6 eggs worth. That's what we came up with our calculation yesterday, which is a half of a isaron. Then for sure you could even wash and bench on the tam-tams if you ate that amount. I don't know how much tam-tams that is. I'd have to look it up in our Keziah's book over here. What we have, how much, if they have tam-tams. It was one of the only good noshes 40 years ago that were popular. Pas Yisrael, Manischewitz, crackers.
Rabbi.
Yes.
So most of these people, you're saying they got to be 500-600 pound people who are eating, have to be satisfied in order for them to say the grace after, after eating.
One second. I'm telling you a case of, here, crackers, tam-tams. 6 crackers is an olive. That means 12 crackers would be an egg. So yeah, you're probably not gonna eat 22 of those. However, there is an intermediate level, and that is where you should not be eating more than that amount without washing on bread, on regular real bread. In other words, if you want to wash on these tam-tams or on cake, then if you want to be able to say hamoitzi on this itself, then 21, then either you're satisfied after 4 eggs worth, or any amount that you're satisfied on, you could wash on. If you're not going to be satisfied, you would need to fulfill this 100%, that you're eating what acherim are koven olav suuda, and others are satisfied on, and you want to wash on this itself, you would eat 21.6 eggs worth. Now, there is an intermediate level where you're not satisfied, but you're eating a large amount, enough that you should wash on other bread to fulfill all questions, to satisfy all questions. And that would be if you ate the tam-tam box, the entire box of tam-tams and you're still hungry. If you did that, you would want to eat a piece of bread, make hamoitzi, and eat your tam-tams, because you're definitely.
Cream cheese.
What is that?
Should have had some cream cheese.
Right. Well, but it's you're definitely somewhere in the gray area where you should be washing on other bread. So that there's the intermediate point there that has to be mentioned. So what Ezra said is correct. If you want to wash on it itself, you would need to be satisfied. If you're not satisfied, and you ate the entire box, really what you should do is wash on other bread, because you've reached the stage where it's considered gray, the gray area. And again, if we look at that, what we were reading from, if you're eating more than 6 eggs worth and you're not satisfied, so you ate more than 6 eggs worth and you're not satisfied, you should recite hamoitzi on another on a bread. If you ate less, if you ate less than 6 eggs worth and you're not satisfied, that's when what Ezra said would be right. You could just make a mezainis and an al hamichya. So it would depend on how much you ate. And I'd have to calculate the whole box, how much is in a box of Tam Tams. But if it's you're not satisfied and it's less than 6 eggs worth, then what Ezra said would be right. You could just recite the mezainis on it. We also spoke yesterday about pizza and pizza made with oil or apple juice or milk instead of with water. And those pizzas, in fact, J2 pizza, you buy it in the stores, they advertise that they're mezainis, the J2 pizza, the frozen pizza. I don't know. I know Costco also sells a Pas Yisrael, Cholav Yisrael pizza from New York. I think they sell Amnons, but I'm not sure if theirs is Hamaitzi. But the J2 pizza that you buy in all the Jewish stores, they advertise that they're mezainis. Now that pizza, very nice that it's mezainis. It's mezainis if you're not going to be satisfied and you're going to eat less than, if you're not satisfied, you eat less than 6 eggs worth, which means less than a piece and a half, and you're not satisfied, fine. But once you're going to be satisfied and you already ate 4 eggs worth, which is 1 slice, if you're going to be satisfied, whatever you're eating at least 1 slice and you're satisfied, or 1.5 slices and satisfied, whatever it is, you for sure have to wash. And you could wash on that pizza alone, because the whole leniency of mezainis is if you're not satisfied and you don't eat an amount that people are satisfied from. And so there's so in any event, if you're not satisfied and you ate 1 slice, that would be fine. You can make the mezainis on it. Yes, Susan.
Doesn't time have something to do with it? How much time it takes you to eat?
No.
Doesn't that, I mean,
No.
Time has nothing.
There is truth to that.
I
There
mean,
is truth to that.
Just having a couple of bites, and 2 hours later having another couple of bites, that's not a meal. Or
Right.
is it a meal?
No, you're right. There's no bracha achreina. There's no after blessing if you didn't eat it within a
Then it
certain
has to
amount
be eaten within a certain
of
amount
time.
of time, correct?
72 minutes.
But
22 minutes?
72.
no.
72 minutes.
Oh,
No, Ezra. That would be the amount of time that you could still bench if you interrupted your meal for that amount of time. Then it could be a problem to bench. But the amount of food you need to eat within a certain amount, you need to have a kazayas, at least an olive size, within a short time frame. And if you nibbled and you just snacked a little on a piece of pizza over 15 minutes, you would not recite an after blessing. No, I shouldn't say that. And a piece of pizza has many kazesim in it. If you had less than the size of an olive in 9 minutes, then you wouldn't recite an after blessing. But normally that doesn't apply, because you're generally going to eat the size of an olive within a short time span. So it's normally not going to apply. But there's truth to that you do have to eat an olive size within a certain amount of time. Okay, now going back to our Gemara, we spoke about a case of there was a wedding. Rav Yehuda was marrying off his son to the daughter of Rav Yehuda Bar Chaviva. It's interesting because there is a tzavah, the will of Rabbi Yehuda Chassid, who says you're not supposed to marry someone if your father's name and their father's name is the same. And here you have Rabbi Yehuda is the Chassid's father's name, and the Kala's father's name is also Yehuda. So commentaries try to deal with, this seems to contradict the famous rule that Rabbi Yehuda Chassid says you shouldn't marry someone if your father's name and her father's name are the same. Anyway, they deal. Maybe it was in his house. It wasn't the daughter of Rabbi Yehuda, or it was in the house of the Rabbi Yehuda Bar Chaviva, or maybe this rule only applies to Rabbi Yehuda, only applies to the tzava, the Rabbi Yehuda Chassid's grandchildren. Maybe it didn't apply to the whole Klal Yisrael. So there's all questions of to what extent we have to follow it, but it does seem that this contradicts it. That teaching. Yes, Ezra.
Well, what's the basis for that rule?
It's unclear. He wrote a lot of rules and Kabbalistic. We don't understand his rules, but we do know to stay away. Don't it's we try to be very careful not to go against some things that he writes there.
It wouldn't be because of Ma'atayin that people might think that the daughter is marrying the father, which is a problem.
I mean, that's a far-fetched type of thing. I don't know. To me, that sounds far-fetched. Again, we're talking about the father's name of the chassan and the father's name of the kala are the same name. So you're saying maybe it looks like he's marrying his sister. I mean, I don't know. That seems very far-fetched to be choished, to be so to suspect. People are going to start thinking that, I don't know.
Unless they
who would
know
want
the
that?
fact.
Who would want to marry their sister anyway? Like, I mean, it's just so strange, and then to start suspecting someone that they're marrying their sister. Yeah, I don't know.
The Egyptians used to do it. The pharaohs used to do it.
They would marry their sisters. Interesting. But
Rabbi,
yes, David.
I'm thinking that if they both have the same name, there might be problems with sneas because the daughter, let's say, thinks that her father's in the house and his name is Moshe, and it's actually her father-in-law. And there's different things with yichud and being alone and sneas and mixing things up. And she thinks she's in the house with her father, and she's really in the house with her father-in-law who has the same name. It could be major problems with yichud and sneas.
Well, it sounds interesting thought. I don't know much about the rules of Rabbi Yehuda Chassid, and I always assume that they're connected to Kabbalistic ideas more than logical or practical stuff. So I'm not sure. Maybe I don't know. And Ezra, the same for you. I don't want to say you're wrong, Ezra. Maybe you're right. I don't know. To me, it's not. I don't know. I really. I'm just mentioning it because I know the commentaries do deal with it over here. It's brought in the commentaries. Okay. So in any event,
a friend of mine, his name was David, and his prospective father-in-law was David. So they made him take on the name Yehuda David. They changed his name. So he wouldn't have the same name as his father-in-law.
Right. So that's another rule. That's an additional thing about not having the same name as one's father-in-law. And you're saying that also might be connected to yichud. Are you thinking that?
I'm not sure, but that's a good idea. I'm glad you mentioned it.
Excuse me, Rabbi.
Yes.
I also heard many times in my life that it was pretty much a no-no to have someone, like say if a lady was marrying someone, that he shouldn't have the same name as her father, and that if he did, they had to take on an additional name in order to change it in some way.
Right. Okay, so the next Gemara mentioned the story, and it said that they brought before him Pasaba Bekisnin, and he heard them making the hamaitzi, and he was like, "What's going on? I hear this tzitza. I hear some hamaitzi. Are you making hamaitzi on this bread? It's Pasaba Bekisnin. This is cake. This is cake bread. You don't make hamaitzi on it." So they said, and they brought the halacha Pasaba Bekisnin. They said, you do make hamaitzi because Rav Muna said in the name of Rabbi Yehuda, in the name of Rebbe Yehuda. that it's hamaitzi, and Shmuel said halacha is like Reb Muna, and they said no, ain't halacha Reb Muna. It was that you got it wrong. Shmuel said ain't halacha Reb Muna, and so they told him, but didn't you say that lachmaniyos, which we translated as pasa baba kisnin, and that you can make an eruv with them, you can make hamaitzi. So he said that's different because you were kaveh suuda on it, and therefore it's hamaitzi. But if you weren't kaveh suuda, you shouldn't make hamaitzi. It's mezainis. You should make a mezainis. Okay, so that was the end of the that Gemara, and now we have the next Gemara. Rav Papa Ikla Levei Rav Huna Reid Rav Nosson. So we're on 42a, and Rav Papa is the last word on the line is Papa. It's about 13 lines down from the top of the page. Rav Papa Ikla Levei Rav Huna Reid Rav Nosson. Rav Papa happened to be in the house of Rav Huna, the son of Rav Nosson, and Rav Papa was eating there. Basar the Gamri Sudasayu, after they finished the meal, so here they finished the meal, and they brought him something else to eat. Shakal Rav Papa b'ka'achal, so Rav Papa took it and started eating it. Amar lei, they said to Rav Papa, Leisavar le'amar, don't you hold Gomar when you finish eating? Asur milechol, you're not allowed to eat till you say the Brochos hamazon, and you could say another bracha, because once you finished eating, you remove your mind from continuing the meal, and once you do that, your meal no longer covers the food that you're going to eat now, and you would have to recite a new bracha. So why are you eating this? You need to recite a new bracha. Amar lahu, he said to them, Silek itmar, that it's not really the end of the meal unless it doesn't matter if I finished eating. It matters if they remove the bread. If they remove the bread and all the food from the table, then you wouldn't be allowed to eat. But if I just stopped eating, that's not considered the end of a meal. Rashi over here says it's usher to eat until you say Berachas Hamazon, until you bench and go and bless again on what's in front of you, because when you finish the meal, you remove your mind from the original bracha and from the meal, and you would need to finish that meal and recite a new bracha. And he says, but when is it considered finished? If they remove the lechem and all the oichel, all the food, that would be the end of the meal. So the Rav Papa taught them a law here, that the end of the meal isn't when you think you've finished eating, it's when they remove all the food from the table. But that's not it. Here comes the next case. Rav and Reb Zera, Rav and Reb Zera, they happen to be in the house of the head of the exile, the exilarch, and Lavasar Desliko Taka Mikamayu, after they removed the table from before them, Shadrule Ristana, they sent another portion of, Rashi says, am nishtar shiud. This is a old French word, which they translate to mean cooked meat. They brought him cooked meat, ristana, and from the Beiresh Galusa. They brought ristana, and so Rava ate it. Rava achel. Reb Zera layachel. Reb Zera didn't eat it because he figured, look, they removed the table, means the meal is over, and we're not allowed to eat until we bench, until we start over. Amar lei. So Reb Zera told Rava, how are you eating? Like Savar Lamar, Silek also milachol, also milachol. Don't you hold that once they remove the table, you're not allowed to eat anymore? Amar lei. So Rava answered, Anan ataka deresh galusa samchinon. We are relying on the table of the Reish Galusa, the head of the exilarch. We are eating at his meal. So we're relying on his meal, on his custom. And whatever he's doing, our mind is on him. If he's sending us more food, then our meal didn't end. In other words, normally the meal ends when we're in our own house, when they remove the table. But when we're in someone else's house, we're relying on the host. He's bringing us more food. It means the meal's not over. It's not over until it's over. The meal is not over. It's still going on. We're at his house. We don't know what's happening. They took away our table. I don't know. Maybe they're bringing out the dessert table. Who knows? What we are relying on him. Our mind is not significant because we don't really know what their plan is, and we are subject to what they decide. And therefore, he said, we don't have to recite a bracha. Our meal is not really over. Yes, Ezra.
So that in those days, those tables were not like the tables that we have here. They're rather the small tables that we would recline and eat by. So when they say they removed the table, I mean, my original thoughts were like, remove the table that I have in my dining room, which is for 12, 15 people, whatever. But that's not the case. We're talking about the individual tables that individuals had before them, on which the food was placed. So when you remove that, it's like, one of those little tables that you have.
Right, the waitresses use, yeah.
Okay, so that would make sense. That they say, we're dependent upon the table of the it means that as long as he's sending out food, we're not done. He's the host. He's the one who's making the decisions.
Right. Now, this law applies in other areas as well, because, like, for example, you're a guest at someone's house and you recite a bracha on one food, but you really don't know if they're bringing out more food. So your mind is really on whatever they're bringing out. And therefore, you would be exempt from reciting other brachas on the same type of, on similar foods, because your mind is whatever they're planning on bringing out. Your mind is on them. If you're in your own house, so you sort of you know what you're planning on eating. But if you're eating but it's someone else, so your mind is on your host. So the same thing is here. The meal isn't over until the host decides that it's over. Yes, Moshe.
Yeah, I want to say this is not a thing from the past where they take the oichel off the table. I know when I was in the Catskills, you eat, you do hamotzi, and you eat, and then after a certain period of time, everything they take the cloth and they take everything and they take everything off of there after a certain period of time. They don't leave it there. They take everything off. They move quickly. They take everything off the table.
Right.
And then and then you say the after blessing. But I just want to mention one other thing. Backtracking a little bit to Ezra. The concept of having two the bride and the groom there, both of them having the same names, their fathers having the same name. That this goes back to the time of hemophilia, even in Europe. Not only did it happen in Egypt, but it happened in Russia and it happened in England under Queen Victoria. That there were cases of hemophilia as a result of intermarriage in the family. You know what I'm saying? So this may have been one of the reasons why this tradition was carried on.
Okay. So we're going to continue here. So the Gemara continues, says, Amar Rav haragel b'shemen. So Rav says, it really depends on the person's tradition, the person's custom in their house. The person who normally smears their hands with oil after they eat. So this was a custom in some households that you wash your hands with oil. You dip your hands in oil, and I guess that was the end of the meal. And so if you normally do that, shemen ma'akvoi, the oil prevents you from ending the meal. And if you didn't do the oil thing yet, you would still be considered part of the meal, and you could eat without a bracha, because the oil, until you do that oil, you're still really part of your meal. And Amar Rav Ashi ki have vinan be Rav Kahana, when I was by the house of Rav Kahana, Amar Lo, and he told us to go anan. He gave the example like us, the regilinan b'meshicha. We are used to doing oil at the end of the meal. That's normally what we do after the meal. Mishcha ma'akvalan, the oil prevents us from concluding our meal, and we would be allowed to continue eating until afterwards. The less hilchas of kol hanishmaitza, the halacha doesn't follow any of these teachings. It doesn't go by ending the meal, finishing the food, removing the food, the oil, smearing one's hands with oil. Ela ki hada amar Rav Chia bar Ashi amar Rav, like what Chia bar Ashi says the name of Rav. Shalish tekifa is saying there are three things that are meant to be done immediately, without any separation. Takef l'smicha shchita, after they do the smicha on an animal, which is they lean on an animal, and when they would bring the sacrifices, they would do something called smicha. And after they lean and do the smicha on the animal, they would have to shecht it right away. The source of it is in a pasuk. It says v'samach v'shachat. It says that they would do smicha and they would do the shchita, and it's understood that it's supposed to be done immediately afterwards. Now, the next immediate thing is takef legeula tefillah. Right after you say the bracha go al Yisrael, you're supposed to say Shmona Esrei, which is what we do in the morning and in the evening. We say the bracha go al Yisrael, and right away we do the Shmona Esrei. Takef lenetilas yadayim bracha. Right after you wash your hands, mayim achreinim, you're supposed to recite the bracha of Berchas Hamazon right after you do the netilas yadayim. So what ends the meal is the mayim achreinim, the washing of the fingertips at the end of the meal. That really is what ends the meal. And those that don't do netilas yadayim, it would be if you say Havlon v'nivrich, or Rabbi Sai nevarich, or Rabbi Sai mevelim benchim. When you say the zimun, that's really what ends the meal. Now, Amar Abaye says, anu noimar, there is another immediate thing. Takef l'tamidei chachamim bracha. Immediate after you honor a scholar and you host a scholar, you receive brachos. As it says in the verse, Shenemar, Vayivarchini Hashem, Biglalecha, Hashem blessed me because of you. Ibayasema mehacha, some say from here. Another verse, Shenemar, as it says, Vayevarech Hashem space Hamitzri Biglal Yosef. Hashem blessed the house of Potiphar, the house of the Egyptian, because of Yosef. So when you host a righteous person in your house, you receive blessings. So that brings us right to the Mishnah. Now, Taisi has an interesting thing. He says, what happens if you forgot to eat the afikoman on Pesach? You forgot to eat the afikoman. And you said, Rabbi Sai Mavel and Benson. What happens? You said Rabbi Sai, and you said, oh, we didn't eat the tzafan. We forgot the afikoman. So Taisa says that we are relying on the table of Hashem. And if a person and if you forgot to eat the afikoman and you didn't, we're relying on Hashem's table. We're still able to eat it. We didn't finish the meal because that's part of the meal is to have the afikoman, and that's what Hashem told us. So because it's a mitzvah to have the afikoman, it's a little leap that Taisus is sharing with us. This is it's a little jump from what we initially would think, that we are really eating at Hashem's table, and therefore Hashem is serving the afikoman. So we have to, our benching, when we decide that we want to bench, that's not benching. It's really when Hashem says it's time to bench. And so just because you said Rabbi Samuel and benching, that actually doesn't end the meal, because we realize that we didn't finish it because we're subject to the mitzvah of afikoman. So that's an interesting point that Taisus shares with, very interesting point, that Taisus says you did not finish your meal, even if you said Rabbi Sai, and which is like the end, is the start of the, you did the initial ascent of the benching. It's not considered that you ended your meal. Taisus then also says, what happens if you did bench and you didn't eat the afikoman? So Taisus says you don't have to go back, because all the matzahs are made for l'shem mitzvah, and Taisus seems to imply that you fulfill the mitzvah of afikoman by the matzah you ate at the seder, which is very interesting.
Rabbi, what do we do with the afikoman that, you've already decided that this was the afikoman, so can you use it again, in the next meal as part of the regular matzah that you put on the table?
It's broken. It's not going to be used for lechem mishnah.
But you've consecrated it as the afikoman.
I don't know if it has any level of holiness. What do you say, Isaac?
I said consecrate.
I said consecrated.
Yeah, past, present, or future. I don't think it's any of them. You're not consecrating. What do you mean by consecrate? You set it aside. You intended to eat it as the afikoman? I don't know what kedusha is the afikoman.
It happens that people lose the afikoman also. And you end up just taking another piece of matzah. So it doesn't have to be specifically that matzah. Also, if those people that have a custom that they steal the afikoman and they charge too much for you to get it back, it's good to know that you could always say, listen, I don't really need it. I could use the other matzah. And this way you'll get yourself a better discount than buying it back, because according to halacha, you don't really need that afikoman. So
my father taught me that at a very young age.
Well, our custom is a little different. And that is that, when you take out the kara from the table and I think you say halachman, and then you're supposed to bring the kara back. That, we don't have this custom. The Sephardim don't have this custom where somebody steals the afikomen.
Right.
But it's the wife who ransoms the kara, the entire plate that has everything on it, and she won't bring it back to the table unless you give her something in return.
Oh boy! So you don't just steal the afikomen, you steal everything.
Right.
That's an expensive.
I like that custom, Ezra.
And this is to
you got to become Sephardic to do that
until the end of the Seder.
You got to become Sephardic to do that.
That's expensive. Tachshitim and all. You gotta. Who knows what you need. But in Lubavitch they don't like the stealing part, so we don't do it. So it makes it a little easier for us. We don't do any of that. But there are other customs, and very nice. That's an interesting one. Actually, now that you mentioned Sephardic custom, I should mention, connected with our Gemara, that we were talking about breads that could be considered mezainos. Now, it's important to mention that when it comes to breads that are baked with less water and majority apple juice, that way of explaining cake is according to the Ashkenazic view. The Sephardic view is a little more strict. And the Sephardic view is that if you can taste that this bread tastes a little different than regular bread with water, it already is a mezainos, which is the reason why Sephardic people, from my understanding, do not buy egg challah. They buy water challah. Because egg challah, even if it's majority water, which it is, egg challah, the majority is water. I've spoken to bakers about this, at least one of them I asked, and they told me that there's a huge amount of other ingredient, eggs and oil and other stuff, but the majority is still water. And nevertheless, Sephardic people would recite a mezainos on egg challah unless they eat a large amount or enough to be satisfied and so on, but so therefore, if you are hosting a Sephardic family in your house, you want to have water challah for them, so they don't have to eat large amounts of challah, and they'll be able to taste your wife's delicious food or whatever, and not just fill up on the challah. But am I right, Ezra, that egg challah could be considered mezainos in this according to the Sephardic view? Because it's here in chapter 168. The Mechaber, the Beis Yosef, he says, if the taste of the mixture of the fruit juice or the spices is recognizable in the dough, then that would be a mezainos. That would be possible b'kisnin. And the Ramah says, no, it has to be, if it's just recognizable, it's still bread. It has to be, there has to be a large amount of it, and that makes that that the spices and the honey is the ikar, is the main thing, and meaning the water would be secondary. So it sounds that it has to be the majority.
So the situation is Erev Pesach, in which you have the situation with Shabbat, in which the Ashkenazim accept the matzah shira as acceptable for hamotzi, whereas the Sephardim will probably not accept it as such, and will require, if you're going to have to eat something, you'll have to do it have to eat bread, have to do it outside, let's say, the house, so that's doesn't cause you problems, you know, with the fact that Pesach is Motzei Shabbat. So in that situation, you know, I defer to the Ashkenazim as a matter of
Convenience.
Shalom Bayit.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Your wife is Ashkenazic then.
Yes.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Yeah, we actually don't do the egg matzah in my tradition. We don't rely on egg matzah because you need to eat a large amount in order to make hamoitzi. We do real challah actually, and I guess, but the question is during the year, do you use egg challah? So if you're going to the bakery for Shabbos and your wife is not baking challah, do you use egg challah or do you use water? Do you specifically ask for the water challah?
I think whatever is brought, I end up eating a lot of it, so it really doesn't matter. So from my standpoint, it's enough for me to make a Birkat Hamazon at the end. So
on the egg, But are you aware of this? That according to the Sephardic custom, that it would be appropriate to have water challah instead of egg challah.
I'm sure at some point I was told that, but as I said, I love challah.
Right.
It really doesn't matter whether it's egg challah or just water challah.
Right. Okay. All right. Well, I guess that concludes this class. We'll see you later. Metz Hashem. Sei gesund, everyone.
All right. Thank you, Rabbi.
Good day.
Thank you, Rabbi. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Rabbi.
Bye-bye.